Welcome
Welcome
to Dune-pla.
Dune-pla!
Staring us in the face.
It really was, yeah.
The unofficial podcast of sandworms. That's right. We're going to talk about exclusively sandworms all day today. We might also touch on the other events of Dune Part 1, but mostly it's going to be a sandworm-focused episode here because, honestly, what more do you want? You care about the story and the characters and the intrigue? No. We've got giant, terrifying sandworms to discuss.
Shai Halud.
So, as we are gathered here to discuss the wonderful first part of the Dune duology that we're about to get, Dune Part 2 is coming out this week, so we're here to talk about Dune Part 1 to get ourselves ready for the exciting sequel. And I can't even talk about it with the wonderful members of the Hoopla Crewpla, including the lore master, Andy Smith.
Andy Smith here, connoisseur of many nerdy things, DC, Marvel, Star Wars, and Dune. I really enjoyed this Dune rewatch, and I'm very excited for Dune Part 2, so it was good to get back to the characters we saw a few years ago and get ready for this Dune Part 2 review.
Absolutely. And yeah, Dune preview, Dune Part 2 preview, Dune Part 1 review. I'm confused. Chris, what are we doing? Welcome. The mastermind of all deserts, the guy who's actually read the book and part of the sequel. I have it on good authority. Chris Pio is here with us.
The authority is me, Chris Pio here, and thanks for the introduction as always, Jamie. But I am a book reader for this one particular episode, and actually, Andrew, I think I'm coming for the lore master title this time around.
Oh, it's true.
Wow.
It's true.
I do not read very
true.
much. I know there was some speculation out there amongst the Hoopla audience if I could read. The answer is yes. It's just I'm very selective about it, and it's pretty rare. I've got other hobbies going on. Oh God, what was that?
That was not me. You pressed enter.
I know. I hit it.
A keen-eyed viewer of the Hoopla podcast can see on Chris's background there is a copy of Dune Messiah right there.
Oh yeah, baby. Yep, these are books. So I'm told BOOKS is what they're called, and I happen to enjoy a few of them. In fact, I even lent one to our resident reader, JB Claire, last weekend. But yes, I will graciously and humbly accept the offer of Lore Master for the episode, even though you did not offer it, Andrew. I will be taking it.
I will gladly,
just like the Atreides are taking control of
Arrakis. Will gladly bestow to you the title of Lore Master as the Fremen bestowed the Chris knife to House Atreides.
Oh,
love that!
Wow, I thought you were going to bestow Lore Master to Chris, just like the Emperor bestowed the planet of Arrakis to the Atreides, which
and
would
then
be
see another viewer
much
or another host take him out, as the Harkonnens did.
And speaking of taking him out, oh my God, popping up out of the sand like a Fremen warrior, it's Jake Laxer.
That was with Sardaukar.
Jake Laxer here, lover of all things TV and movies. Dune, how fun is this movie? It's the largest exposition dump in the most epic Christopher Nolan sort of way ever. And so we'll dive into it. That was a point brought up by my girlfriend Lana, which I greatly agree with. This is the most Christopher Nolan, non-Christopher Nolan film ever. And to that point, we're going to dive into it because it was entertaining, but you really had to stay motivated for it. Let's dive in.
Oh,
wow.
Whoa.
All right.
A bit of a take at the end of the intro there.
Early aggressive opinions coming from Jake Laxer here.
Okay.
Well, I, for one, did not find it boring. Just like you and Chris are always finding these things boring and tedious. No. Unbelievable.
Not this time.
But we forgot to do the rest of the intro. Thanks for tuning in. Yay. We love when people tune into the Hoopla podcast. You can keep up to date with everything we're talking about. We'll be doing Dune Part 2 next week, of course. And if you want to see what else we're talking about, Chris, where can they find us?
You can locate us at Hoopla Podcasts on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Definitely follow us over there on the TikTok. We've got some fun new content coming out for you. Clips from the show, fun little TikTok trends that we're far too old to be trying, but we'll be doing anyways. So definitely keep with us in the conversation. Follow us at Hoopla Podcasts on X, Instagram, and TikTok.
Jamie, that is a nice shirt. All our viewers can go out to hooplapodcastnetwork.square.site to show off the navy blue. It's not navy blue. We have a specific brand here.
It's
Atreides blue.
Is it the Atreides blue?
Is it the Blue-pla?
Yep.
That it could be. Hoopla Podcast Network.square.site. Get some for nerds merchandise.
Do it right now. I dare you. Otherwise, the Sardaukar are coming for you.
True.
That's right. We're going to start threatening our listeners. Anyway, let's talk about Dune Part 1. I hadn't watched this movie since it came out 3 years ago. Loved it then. It was very exciting. A huge epic movie about the wonderful planet of Dune, aka Arrakis, where we meet up with Paul Atreides and his father, who has become the new leader of Arrakis. What's his title?
Yeah, Duke
of Arrakis. But things go awry pretty quickly, and we get a whole lot of political stuff going on, and we get an equal amount of epic battle stuff going on. So I don't know why Jake's over here saying that it was slow and tedious, but I personally thoroughly enjoyed it. I may have even enjoyed it more watching it the second time than I did the first time 3 years ago. What'd you guys think?
That is facts, actually. This is definitely one of those types of movies that needs a rewatch. Again, like I said in our intro, major exposition dump. You are hit with a wealth of information right from the get-go, and you are really thrown into this universe. And you really don't know what's going on, why different houses are being placed as to where they are. Again, you're getting epic shots left and right, and you're being thrown into different worlds. You have to digest a lot of material very quickly. But the good news
I can say something, they actually make it way more clear in the movie than they do in the book. When you read the book Dune, like the first 50, 80 pages maybe, you're just like, what is happening? Who are these names of people that they're giving us?
Right.
What is the relationship between these houses, and why are the Bean Jezzers over here? Because it's hard to pronounce names when you're reading books.
That would be that's true, Jamie. That would be a very hard word to say. What about Sardaukar?
I was calling the main character Paul for like the first 20 pages.
Let's talk about that.
Jessica. Oh, I know Jake wanted to bring this up.
Yeah. So one thing I just am marveled by is the two lead characters are Paul and Jessica in a world that has the most exotic names ever known to sci-fi. And
Duncan, Idaho.
What? That's not true. Most exotic names.
Some of these names are pretty wild. Let's look back through the film and look at these crazy other names that we have.
Okay,
Duncan?
well, time out here. First of all, this is year 10191.
Yeah.
Across the galaxy. People have different types of names. I don't know if that but I guess
just don't feel like Paul and Jessica fit in the same category as any other name in this entire series.
Leto's kind of
because they're from an ancient group. They have a name coming back from the ancients. The Bene Gesserit go back thousands. That might be not. They go back a lot of years. I don't want to put specific numbers on it, but it makes sense for them to have names of similar to the names that we have, us mere year 2000 people who have not yet gone through the wars and the evolutions that happen over the course of the next 20,000 years, leading up to when Dune starts. And so it's just like being called Xerxes or something. Which is
not to mention, I think the name itself, Paul. You can talk about Jessica. You can talk about Duncan. You could talk about how they're average names in a non-average universe. The name Paul is obviously original context can be taken from the Bible should you choose to see it that way. We do have a very religious experience for a very religious character here, so it makes sense that the name Paul might actually end up being a religious context name. So that makes sense to me. Jessica, maybe not, but I don't think it's... I was with you yesterday when we watched it, Jake. We did watch it together, and it was a great time.
Ooh,
But
It was
great.
a great time.
that was an outlandish way to take it. I don't think it's the most crazy thing in a universe. There's not that many crazy names.
Okay, so
Hi. What's up, Dark?
that is Lady Jessica of the of the Bene Gesserit. And talking about the Bene Gesserit, so on the second rewatch, I agree, Jamie. I like this movie a lot more. I think the first time, to Jake's point, you are thrown in. There was a great quote from Denis Villeneuve a few weeks ago, leading up to Dune Part 2, where he said a lot of the media, a lot of the movies today are coming out when they have a lot of dialogue. He doesn't want a lot of dialogue. He wants to have a story shown through imagery and through visuals, and that truly is what this movie is.
True.
They don't have that. There's not, and you said exposition dump, but I think it's more of here's just like things are happening and you're slowly catching on this second rewatch here. I really understood the political dynamics that Chris and Jamie can talk to a little bit more. I love the Bene Gesserit being there, crossing bloodlines for thousands of years. Lady Jessica did something she wasn't supposed to for her husband, that then kind of sets off this, is he a Messiah type character, right? And at the same time, totally separate is the Imperium kind of dynamics and how the leader is playing houses against one another, the kind of feudal feel. It's just really interesting. There's a lot of dynamics, and that's what I'm so excited for, especially going into Dune Part 2.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be super exciting to see the aftermath of that huge battle we got towards the end when Paul and Jessica escaped. We haven't gone back to really see what's happened. Obviously, we saw Duke Leto die and attempt to kill
Eulogy music for Duke
name.
Leto.
Dr.
The big
Yu?
fat guy.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Baron.
Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah. We saw that, but like, what else is going to be the aftermath of the Harkonnens invading Arrakis like that? I'm excited to get to that and all the stuff in the desert.
Yeah, the Fremen.
Chris, what do you think about this movie now that you have begun to read the sequel of the book? Are you getting a little bit more insight after seeing the movie again that leads into where the second book goes?
Honestly, no. The second book does have a bit of a mood shift as well as a time jump. I won't say anything more about that. A, because we're not talking about the books in general, but B, we're not talking about part two, or we're not talking about the second book. Part two of the movie is going to be the back half of Dune, the book. And there may be little things out of place, but in terms of additional context from just reading through the second one so far, not a lot. Frank Herbert's writing style is incredibly detailed about certain things that may not matter. Yes, it helps you set the tone very, very well in terms of reading a book about a planet with nothing on it. But he'll spend a decent amount of time describing the sand on each dune and what it looks like and how much spice is resting on top of that sand and stuff that doesn't matter except to just kind of put you in the mode of reading this book. A lot of the political intrigue stuff is all still there. For the second part of the movie, for Dune Part 2, I'm very excited to see how much they're going to include from the book, because in the first part, the first movie that we watched, they nailed a lot of the first half of the book, I think. I don't think they left a lot of decent parts out. They did move some stuff around, maybe add a little bit of things here and there in terms of context that wasn't necessarily in the book as important. But I think people are going to be really excited. If you're a Dune reader, you're going to absolutely love this second part. I know what's coming. Do you guys have any idea what's coming in the part two of the movie?
War.
That's for sure.
Maybe.
I could speculate, and I bet it happens to be Paul Atreides getting on one of those sandworms and eating some Sardaukar. Is that a good guess?
That's a decent guess, but
He may or may not ride a sandworm. Yeah, I really like the tease that we got at the very end of this movie where we almost saw it with wow, I really can't remember anybody's name.
Dr.
Nope. The Fremen who helped Jessica
Stilgar.
and Paul escape.
Dr. Liet Kynes.
Yes,
Dr. Liet Kynes.
Right before she's killed, she pulls out the hooks. And we see the sandworm coming, and I'm like, oh, baby.
So cool.
And she gets killed. And then at the very end,
was shocking.
one of the last shots, we see a Fremen riding a sandworm. And I'm like, oh, man, actually, I can't wait for part 2.
There was something so subtle about that scene that I absolutely loved, and it spoke to the depth of the story of Dune. When she gets stabbed in her still suit, she bleeds water and not blood. I don't know if you noticed that frame.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Okay.
The sheer importance of being able to drink in this world that is just so extremely desolate is more important
Water
than blood
is the
itself.
lifeblood.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Everything's all about the reclamation of water, the saving of water. You mean you'll get attacked.
That was a very cool scene.
The water your body has. Very cool scene. Very sad scene. I kind of wanted to see more of Liet Kynes. You have so much. What am I trying to say? Not sympathy, I guess, because she technically is an imperial relationship. Definitely working under the guise of trying to help the Empire. Empire? Imperium. I'm going to call it the Imperium. Otherwise, I'm going to get too Star Warsy. But the Imperium, certainly evil, certainly forcing the hand, and you have a lot of I do. I want to say sympathy for Liet Kynes as a character. I think you're supposed to, in the way that she's doing the best she can to help Paul and Jessica in a bad situation, but really she's lingering on a dream that's too far gone that the Imperium has forced out of her hand, which is sad.
And she's an honorable character for, remaining true to the Imperial and what she represents. But then she gets to begin to know Jessica. She gets to begin to know Paul and the Atreides house. Right. And she begins to open up and sort of reveal, not too much, because again, she is loyal, but she begins to see their side and wants to help them sort of navigate this appropriately.
I think that's a running. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
And she wasn't Fremen, right? She had married into the Fremen. Like, was it her? They mention a relationship she had. Was that her significant other? Was that another familial relationship? Do you recall?
You're asking good questions.
It's a good question. Yeah, she was definitely. She said she could live in both Siege and Village. She lived in both worlds, and we see towards the end there she does claim herself to be a Fremen, as she's now allying herself with that side of this conflict. And so I think I don't remember the specifics of how she came to be part of both worlds, but who knows? Maybe she's the Little Mermaid. I don't remember.
She's a really good example of a minor character that had a large impact, and they have many of these characters. Almost every major or minor character had at least one standout moment that felt and I'm going to relate this over to Lord of the Rings because we just got off of it, inspirational in some way.
Sure.
Each you had a character like Dr. You had a character, obviously Jessica was a major character, but just each, you had Duncan Idaho, you had Gurney, Josh Brolin. And it wasn't just, and they got these stars to play these smaller roles, and it just worked because when they were on screen in limited time, you just felt the presence of Josh Brolin, right? His power. Obviously, Jason Momoa, I thought was incredible in limited screen time here.
I would say the casting as a whole for this movie was incredible.
Top-notch.
Top-notch, beautifully diverse cast, and honestly, everyone did a phenomenal job bringing the most that they could to the screen. I think they did a great job in terms of also costume design. If we take the Harkonnens, specifically, who's the lead Harkonnen? Stellan Skarsgård playing the Baron was absolutely incredible. The moment where he begins to elevate is the most ominous, discomforting, unsettling, eerie scene in the entire film. And it's like, what the fuck are the Atreides up against?
It's terrifying.
And that scene gives me chills.
That's a thematic choice by the director of photography and I mean the overall writing team, because I'm not going to use too much. I'm gonna cash in one of my book relationship tokens. How many do I get for the episode?
You only get 11 more.
11 more.
11 even
in the book, and I'm not sure if they'll ever show this in part 2 when we go and see it this week. That's just a kind of like a mechanical lift chair, just based on the technology. Remember the floating orbs,
right?
That Paul and the Atreides can kind of like move around. It's just the technology of the age, and that floating chair is described in the book of holding his fat, grotesque body afloat in the air.
So when he got the smoke pushed like into his face from Duke Leto, and he suspends himself in the air, that's not his own power. That's actually a mechanism that he has on. So I had no idea.
He can't fly.
I was wondering, how do the Harkonnens fly?
Right. Well, to Jake's point, it's not a power or an ability or anything, but thematically they chose in the movie to represent it in a very chilling way, which I think works to the fear of the Imperium and of course the Harkonnens. So I'm interested to bring that up. Yeah.
He embodies just this disgusting mass of wealth and glut after ruling Arrakis for I think it was 80 years that the Harkonnens ruled over Arrakis, which brings in spice, the most valuable thing in the entire universe. The Harkonnens are now the wealthiest family, at least in the top of the wealthiest families in the universe, and he's just this disgusting, gluttonous, horrible person, so fat that he can't even walk anymore. And he has to have this levitating chair move him around, yet he still has this terror within him. And the way that they filmed it, and the way that we got these shots from like underneath, watching him float up high and above, and you see just this lurking, terrifying figure, was beautiful and scary and very well done.
Defiant of physics of sorts, with his back being like sutured by like biomechanical mechanisms. Like it's eerie. It is definitely eerie. But yeah, I mean, everything they were doing there was great. I love to see that they did wonderfully with the costume design.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about the Harkonnens, what did you guys think about Dave Bautista's character? He's kind of like the grunt that is just quick to anger, but also quick to kill his enemies.
Yeah.
Really interesting dynamic with him along with his uncle there.
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
As great as Dave Bautista is and was in the movie, I was slightly disappointed with the character. Rabin is actually kind of like, in the book, cashing another token. In the book, he's
10.
kind of more like a, what am I trying to say? Kind of like a Tom and Jerry type of character. Kind of like he has these schemes, but things don't really work out for him quite the way they wanted to. He's still vicious, and they definitely lean into the viciousness of the Harkonnens by showing that. I mean, he literally lines up a bunch of prisoners of war and starts chopping their heads off during the invasion scene, which is brutal and looks amazing. But in the book, he's kind of the dim-witted apprentice of the Emperor, and the Emperor always gives him these commands, and he can never really get anything right. But they really focused in the movie on the viciousness, and I think Dave Bautista, when he was screaming at the top of his lungs and saying, "How could they do this? How could they take this from us?" I think that was just a direction that they chose for the character, and I think it worked well, even if the book wasn't necessarily represented as accurately.
Who needs to represent the book when you have Dave Bautista? Just being Dave Bautista.
Well, and then that along with like the Baron's responses and he's much more dry and just kind of says calm, he's like, calm yourself. Like he's clearly the leader of this society, and he just has his, not dim-witted, but it feels like quick to anger, little kind of enforcer. He's a good enforcer.
He's juvenile in a sense. These, apt
definitely juvenile.
But let's talk about the flip side, going back to Paul and everything and such. For me, watching this movie,
Paul and everything and such.
Yeah, Paul.
Let's dive into it.
We can dive into anything right now.
You guys ready to talk about Star Wars, the War in the Stars?
Oh my God, why not? All this to say, the first time I went and watched through this movie, I think my biggest issue was that I had difficulty placing myself in the shoes of the main character because
you're not destined for greatness.
Well, not yet. Now that I watch it again, now I can feel it. It's coming to me. Anyhow, Paul Atreides, it's difficult to just sort of follow this character initially because you really have to invest yourself into following his footsteps. And what I mean by that is this story is so religious in a sense, and if you don't buy into that, you completely miss its calling. And so like having the hallucinations with the spice as he's going through and trying to save the people on the mining rig, that's a whole element. Then trying to find a better grasp of how this relates with the denizens of Arrakis, and just trying to buy into all of this. I don't know. All of it was very convoluted for me the first go around, that I didn't grasp any of it until I really actually fully paid attention.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex story going on. We have so many different players in this big political game, and as you're saying, religious game. Like the Bene Gesserit have been for decades now,
centuries,
sowing the seeds for Arrakis to be ready for Paul and Jessica. They've created this mythology of the savior to come from the outer worlds and come and save the people of Arrakis. And so there's just been this myth that the Bene Gesserit have implanted in the minds of and in the culture of the Fremen, specifically for Paul and Jessica to arrive on Arrakis. And then you have all that mystical dreams that he has, and it's weird. It's weird for sure.
I think it's really interesting with that. You then have the leader of the Bene Gesserit, the truthsayer, that then makes a small comment that we have other potential I don't know what they call them, the one, or whatever,
Quasat Haderach.
Quasat Haderach. And so that there's just this scheming group that clearly is bending the galaxy to their whims. And that's what I'm super excited for, by the way. The Sisterhood comes out later in 2024 as a TV series about the Bene Gesserit. So
I did not know that.
I didn't know that
that's
either.
Going to be very
Which streaming service
that's on track. But I'm pumped for that too.
Is that on Max? Please tell me that's on Max.
It is.
Should be.
Thank God.
It might actually be good.
Shout out to Max, sponsor of this episode. Thank you, Max.
Wow.
No,
my God, we'll have a podcast studio in no time with sponsors like that.
that actually brings me great hope for that show.
Yeah,
I had no idea that was happening.
I would love for the Dune universe to expand. But to talk about the universe, you're right, Jake. I think the way I'm thinking about it is, if you take the hero's journey, you take some innocent hero, they learn about their journey, they get help, they find the magic sword, they return, all that jazz. We're kind of halfway through the hero's journey when you even start to learn about Paul. He's already trained. He's already supposed to be some hero. He doesn't quite know what his destiny is yet, but he's a force to be reckoned with. He's a part of a mystical family. He's a part of a royal family at the same time. He's already balancing these two lives. And then Frank Herbert just throws a bunch of random nonsense words at you. And the main hero gets tortured in the first quarter of the book and movie. So You're right.
That
It's
was
hard
like
to
wild
jump.
10
scene.
pages of the book.
Yeah, for a while.
Really?
So it's hard to relate to a character like that when you first jump in. I mean, you got Harry Potter, who's going to school for the first time, learning to be a wizard. You've got obviously the Luke Skywalkers of the world who are learning about the Force and learning about their ancestry and things like that. Meanwhile, Paul is already a badass. He's already a member of two very distinct and important family styles, and he kind of jumps right into just being a hero. So you make a good point. It is hard to relate to a main character like that.
It's hard to relate, but it's, who you can really relate to more similarly is like Gaia. What a great character.
Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry.
That might have been
derailed.
your worst comment of.
Wow.
Can we put him in timeout?
I'm sorry.
Can
I'm
we,
sorry.
Do we have a timeout system?
Secret Invasion, dude. I
Put him in the box.
I should have jumped in
Unacceptable.
there.
Put him in the box.
The Secret Invasion
No,
writers have co-opted Andy's microphone and are ruining this podcast. Talk about
I think
the adventures.
Just one
Continue.
final point on characters. I'm not the first to say this. I mean, this book was written in the 50s. This movie was made, plenty of years ago. The main character is Arrakis. I'm not some novelist. I'm not some.
Look at you,
No.
little
People have said that long
critic.
times before me, but they make it a point in this movie as well to state that that is the main character. There are many stories that will happen here, and many stories that will never make it off the planet. But at the end of the day, it's all about the Dune.
It's all about the Dune.
All about
That's
the
pretty
Dune.
That was cooler than my guy.
Jake, we are recording this podcast.
Is that what you call the Dune?
What are you doing?
Wouldn't you like to see the Dune?
No.
Cut that. I'm sorry.
Too late. We can't cut it.
Quick, go
Because
to
now we're
commercial.
moving on to. We mentioned a few minutes ago we mentioned how all these characters had incredible scenes. So let's just go through the best scenes by some of these characters that we may or may not see again. Let's start with, of course, Donkey Idaho.
Yeah.
Great character. Jason Momoa knocked it out of the park in this movie.
Yeah.
His just excited enthusiasm every time he saw Paul, and his thrill of the fight that he had every time he was going out there and just stabbing the heck out of all these Sardaukar. I loved it. What was his best scene in y'all's opinion?
I like his opening. I know that's not the fun action sequence at the end, but Duncan Idaho, the first time that he meets Paul, gives some relatability, I think, maybe to Jake's question about Paul.
I agree with that.
He makes him like the relatable uncle, or the relatable, like, just leader of, one of the family friends.
Right.
And there is some good moments between those two characters that really make it so you like Duncan Idaho, and then after that you see how powerful he actually is, and it really builds up to what we get at the very end there. Also, I like the spitting scene, but I'm sure someone else will say that.
I personally like the scene directly after the tragedy, when Paul and Jessica are getting away by the skin of their teeth, but Duncan Idaho ends up catching them in an ornithopter, runs up to them, and I mean, his main mission is to protect those two people amongst the entire Atreides family, but he has failed at most of it, and now he sees two people that he can actually have an impact on. He's got a rush of emotions. He runs up to them, immediately bows down to the new Duke Atreides, which I think
is cool.
As some of his great scenes are, witty, comical, just like Jason Momoa can be, but that one scene I think hit hardest for me.
Yeah, the scene where he kicks everyone's ass in the hallway is definitely the best scene. I think there's no debate there. I love your symbolism. That's lovely, but the choreography in that sequence was
my gosh,
awesome. So
it was so
good.
cool. And with the shields
the
that everybody's wearing, and how Duncan Idaho is so good at getting the blade just slow enough to go through the shield and make it to the body, and just he took down like 15 dudes.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, that was dope. And then actually after he gets stabbed through the body, proceeds to rip said sword out of his body, then still continue to kill people.
So cool.
Which is, I mean,
but like gives them enough time to like not get hit by a laser. Not that he knew that, but like he was trying to buy more time, and it was what a heroic like death for that character. I'm really sad actually that he's not going to be in Dune Part 2.
It is.
Maybe he will be,
but you know,
I haven't seen it yet.
Might be in Dune Part 2. Another incredible character, Gurney Halleck, that we had here, played by Josh Brolin. We discussed. We see him at the end leading a charge of Atreides soldiers into battle. We don't see him die. We just see him.
Do we know what happened to that army at that moment? Obviously they cut away and we've seen explosions from far views, but do we really know what happened there? Or maybe they're just kind of leading it to, we're going to see him with a remnant of the army left or something like that in Dune Part 2. I'm kind of interested.
I mean, if you don't see it explicitly in Hollywood, the opportunity's still there.
Stannis is alive.
Jake off-screen Laxer.
That's what they call me. I mean, hey, here I am.
Hey, show us your legs again.
Oh, you mean
no, the other way.
Off screen, on screen. Thank you.
Okay, now we've talked about some heroes. Let's talk about some more heroes. We have some really nice. How's that for a nonsense?
What a transition!
Yeah.
The scenes that we get when Paul and Jessica are first sent out into the desert, I think we get a really beautiful insight into their relationships. Like we'd seen Paul and Jessica with a real mother-son kind of relationship earlier in the movie, as she's telling him, oh, you need to do this. You have responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. The Bene Gesserit, all that stuff happens. And then we see a transition as soon as they make it to the desert. And now Paul is taking on the leadership role, the responsibilities of being the new Duke. And we see a shift in that relationship specifically. And I really liked how proud Jessica was of Paul, watching him do everything that he did, lead the way, and eventually kill Jamie. Whoops.
Wow,
and
spoilers.
That's how you pronounce his name, right? And
Yamas.
Yeah.
I don't know. James.
Pretty sure it was Jamie.
Yeah, I think it's Jamie.
It could be.
I'm pretty sure it's Jamie.
Yeah.
I really like the relationship between Paul and Jessica, especially in the second half of the movie, where it completely shifted from where it started at the beginning of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's almost a sense, there's definitely a sense of pride. The emotional scene, I'm truly about halfway through the film where they're in that tent and she sees Paul, the reaction to the melange and everything that's happening. He's becoming awakened and all that. She is proud of what he can accomplish, but I think she's also fearful. And who wouldn't be? I mean, she's a part of this cult organization that's been trying to do this one thing for so long, and she's seeing it she's witnessing it right now. Not only is it happening to her, but it's happening to her son. So yes, there's an element of pride, but I also see a big element of fear in that. One thing I said to you, Jake,
I must not fear.
Yeah. The fear is the mind killer. Yeah. One thing I said to you yesterday, Jake, is I love how the direction they took with this film and the body language, which is normally very important in conveying tone and mood, is not nearly as important as facial expression in this film. Most of the characters are either in still suits or completely robed up with, by the way, gorgeous direction in terms of anything that happens with the production department. And that we could talk about all the details of the actual film at the end. But while we're talking characters, I think, she's got a face that just is proud of her son, but at the same time mortified. And they both break down into tears in that one scene. And it's just very emotional transition for the film. Like you said, Jamie, it's a whole shift. Big shift.
Yeah. And we see just the very last shot of Jessica at the end of the movie as Paul, goes off to become kind of a leader figure. He's getting there with the Fremen, and you see Jessica's smiling at first, and then
but
her
there's
face
some concern.
drops
Yeah,
at the very
that's
last
cool.
second.
Yeah, and I think that scene of becoming is extremely important because it's also the moment at which he defines himself as king, as Duke in that moment, because Jessica even makes a suggestion as to what they should do, and Paul's like, no, we must go on with the Fremen. We must move on with
My path leads to the desert.
Correct. And so that in of itself is coming of the Messiah. And so I think that's awesome. Back to the tent scene. We talked about earlier the little subtleties that are in this movie. There's also a moment where we see water channeling through the exterior of the tent, which is very symbolic of, and almost looked to me like the bloodstream, like little capillaries. And again, having that correlation between blood and water that we see when Dr. Leah Kynes dies.
But symbolism.
It's like they're in a womb inside the tent, getting reborn into the desert.
Oh, right. And I pointed out to Chris, as we see this sacrificial scene with the blood running over the hands, as to, it's kind of obscure as to who's dying in this scene, or this vision. You see the slight sparkle of the spice in the bottom right corner as he's like processing and hallucinating and emanating, and it's very cool how they did things, but you really, again, have to pay attention to this film because you will miss that subtlety, and that's where the brilliance of what this movie is. So
one of my favorite parts of their relationship, and there's little to no dialogue, but it might be around the time that they talk about the fear is the mind killer, when they're in the ornithopter and they're going up and they have to get to the 5,000 meters. And he thinks, and he sees a vision of Jamie, and he says, go, it's like flow with the sand, and he turns the ornithopter off, and she buckles in harder, but she doesn't, say, don't do that. What are you doing? She doesn't ask a question. She just goes along with who she is seeing becoming what Jake is talking about.
Here's Mind Killer.
That is such a cool scene, by the way, when he does turn it off and the ornithopter is just flying at what did Dave Bautista's character said, how 800 mile per hour winds or something like that. No one can survive. That was such a visual masterpiece. And then once you do make it up above the cloud, just beautiful visuals, which is what this whole movie is. But it's just so interesting because that's a desert storm. How many times have we seen desert storms in movies? None portrayed in this way. Which is really cool.
Andy, you reminded me of something there. And I don't know if this was a rip off of The Matrix, but that's 100% a moment as to when Neo is with Trinity and they float through the clouds and they see the beautiful sunset right above the machine city, and then they plummet right back into the reality of the cursed world.
The reality of the Matrix.
Like they were at peace. And then
they were
weren't.
at peace. Okay. Exactly. When they're flying in this ship, and then they, snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity.
That one works.
And that's what Paul's saying. Right when they hit the sand, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
As she got on the rocks.
His palms were sweaty.
No.
Well, not really. That was
away.
that was already drained.
Yeah, beautiful little connection there. Let's finally discuss the character that we've been avoiding this whole podcast for some reason. We haven't mentioned Zendaya one time.
They're gonna say,
I know she only comes in the last 15 minutes, but we get Stilgar and we get Chani, I believe is her name,
right?
And all the Fremen. What do you guys think of being introduced to this little band of Fremen for the first time? And what are you looking forward to as the adventure continues?
Well, as someone who doesn't know what's going to happen next,
I'll speak first, and I'll speak lightly for that exact reason. I thought it was a perfect production. I thought the introduction of Chani at the very beginning, which very much happens in the book, it was perfectly planned. I think it was well spaced. I think the showing of the visions, and I think the introduction to the Fremen lifestyle was awesome throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, I think they really nailed it. Having so few Fremen really on screen for the first movie, we still got such a deep insight into their culture, and especially the water aspect of it, as Jake was mentioning earlier. Like, we see how incredibly important all the water stuff is. But for the two guys who have never read the book before, how'd you guys feel about the intro?
Jake, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak more on Timothée Chalamet's interaction with Zendaya in this scene. I pointed this out to Chris when we were watching. The way that he portrays his inner conflict of wanting to like relay as to the fact that he knows her but has never met her before.
That was interesting.
They did a very
it seemed believable. Right?
It did. They actually did a very good job.
How do you say, like, what do you say to her at that moment?
Hey,
he already saw them making out.
He stabbed me and we kissed a little bit.
Zendaya,
me neither.
Zendaya had already practiced for this scene years ago, when she was in No Way Home with Tom Holland, and they did the spell with Doctor Strange, and Tom had no idea who she was, or the other way around, whatever. Yeah, but same deal.
Yeah.
She was ready for it. Same deal.
Yeah,
she's typecast as a girlfriend who is forgotten. Well, I don't know.
What do you say? What do you say to the girl that you're about to start a holy war with? Like, that's just a
Come with me. Let's do this thing.
Let's go for it.
It's weird to meet a girl and recognize her, like, oh, I saw you on Instagram. Oh.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it's like.
Shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. Hey, I've been thinking about you for
so
a while.
Many times before.
So, Jamie, I did think though that Chani, like, starting off in like Act 1, Act 2, I thought that they gave you enough of, okay, this is where he's heading, so that he's going to interact with her. And I thought it was good to introduce her at the end. I could see where that could be disappointing for an audience, but this seems truly like the first half of maybe a book, right? So, like, but if it is one of those things, they build her up. He has, a few scenes with her. Obviously, it ends looking at her and looking at the desert. So as just a general audience member, that this isn't an important character, but I could see that might have been a bit of a turnoff towards the end of the movie there, because she does seem like she seems like a really interesting character. She's not like Stilgard, and some of these other Fremen seem to be maybe a little bit more radical, whereas she says, "I don't believe who you say you are, or whatever. You're not the one."
Right.
So you can tell that she's a little bit different.
Poised,
I think it's a good setup for part 2. Maybe a little lacking in part 1 for the general audience.
This is only the beginning.
I'll use another book token here, and maybe Jamie, you can remember this part too.
You have 9 remaining.
9 remaining. I hope
Wow,
not to get to
pretty
9.
good.
I just want to be, like I said, I'm the lore master this episode because I've read one book. The Chani, like I said, the Chani introduction in terms of how they plan.
Dune is truly the one book you've ever read.
Actually,
what
wild.
An insane life you've lived. I've never read Green Eggs and Ham. I've never read Harry Potter. I've read fucking Dune.
Nah, man, it was Where the Sidewalk Ends and then Dune. I just went right for it.
He went from the first grade reading level over to Dune and hasn't read a book since.
He's halfway through Dune Messiah.
The way they introduce the visions and everything that Paul is eventually going to see with Chani and the Fremen, like I said, the movie did it perfectly. The one thing that, to Andrew, to your point, where audiences might be turned off, Jamie, I don't know if you remember this, the fight scene that happens towards the very end, the Amtal or Amal, what is the word?
That was a cool fight.
Amtal, Amtal, I think. Amtal, the fight to the death, the challenge. that could technically, if you're cutting the book in half at a good stopping point, some people, I remember the discussion when this movie came out, that they would probably not have included that in the first movie. And most of the Fremen introduction does happen in the latter half of the book. I think this is not a bad take to have, and I think it was a very good thing for them to do. Having Zendaya in your movie is a good idea.
Sure.
I don't see any reason not to.
You got to open
her.
up for the main character or
Absolutely.
one of the two main characters, I guess. Presumably, if she's the second main character, because I don't know. Like, I assume she is.
Oh yeah, well, you've seen the billing for the second part. I mean, there's no doubt that she's not in it. How
and you
much
can't just
she'll
have
be in it,
someone show up in all of your trailers only to find out that it's just a scene from a future vision.
Yeah,
like Madam Web.
Dude, I was gonna make that reference actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
So you gotta have her in the movie at least a little bit. I think they did it perfectly, giving us just enough to see where the next part of the adventure is going for Paul and Jessica.
Yeah,
and introducing us to their slightly brutal and unforgiving culture that they have.
Hey, I do, talking about that towards the end there, I loved the introduction to the Fremen following right after they're running from the sandworm, from the Shai-Hulud, right? It was really cool. They did this a few times. You're learning about the Fremen along with Paul when he's on Caladan. He's watching video. I was going to say video drama, but it's probably more like a video documentary about they move on the sand in ways that are rhythmic. And like, that was really cool to see at the end of the movie. Then follow up with the actual, the worm come out in its full glory, looking over top as they're standing there on the rocks. Obviously then the Fremen save them. And then you go right into kind of that opening with the Fremen and the battle seat or the fight. Also, Jessica, heck of a fighter too. I loved Stilgar, his reaction to getting bested by her immediately.
That was great.
It was really cool.
That was great. I was laughing with, you brought up the sand walking. I was laughing with Chris actually when we were doing the watch, because it was just funny to me. It was almost like, Paul had watched like a YouTube video on how to appropriately walk through the sand, and then he's like trying to teach his mom, and the Fremen are like watching these bumbling morons, like obviously like attracting a worm. It's gonna cause some complication at some point. I just thought it was kind of funny, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can watch a couple YouTube videos and you're an expert on anything, dude. That's how you became a dentist, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
YouTube
I like how, Jamie, what are we calling him? Jamie for the pod?
We'll call him Jamie.
I like how
Jamie
tries to challenge Jessica.
Yeah.
And Stilgar says, no, my friend. You cannot do that. Calls her Sayadina, which is the Fremen word for Bene Gesserit. So he clearly recognizes her power after getting taken down immediately.
Oh, yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah, I mean, exciting movie all around. I can't wait for this second half. I was already excited for Dune Part 2 leading up to this week, but then after this rewatch, and after seeing the initial reviews sitting at 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, I am extremely excited for Dune Part 2, and I'm excited for Dune-pla Part 2. That's what we're calling it.
Yeah. I think we got to do the typical, what did you like most? And then what are you most looking forward to? It's not every day we get to do a part 1 and part 2 of something.
That is true.
This is
very true.
Exciting.
Can I go with my most expected, or my highest expectations for this next movie? Something I'm very interested in is the Imperium. And the introduction to whoever this emperor is, played by a certain Christopher Walken. I don't know if that's a good choice. Some people say it's not. I don't know, because I don't know the
Christopher Walken's in this. I didn't know that.
He is. So I think I love. Well, we always talk about the world building, And I'm not the lore master here. Chris Pio is the lore master, and I'm sure there's a lot of lore that they can explore in the second movie that kind of expands. Obviously, Arrakis is, the central point of this conflict, but just even the glimpses into Kaladin and I think Kedah Prime, where the
Gady Prime,
Gady Prime, that was really interesting just to see other civilizations and how much different they are. Also, love the fact that in one of the visions, Paul is back at Kaladin, right? There's so many things that could happen, and you don't know what vision was false and what vision was true because our favorite Jamie character didn't have the conversation that he did in one of the visions with Paul. So like, there's just a lot of different ways, but I'm excited for the world building of some of these different places and what the Emperor is doing and what is his goal.
Oh, there's so much I want to tell you.
Oh yeah, Chris is giddy with knowledge. This is what happens
knowledge
when you read
power.
books, Chris.
Who knew they had knowledge?
Wow.
Who knew there was knowledge in books? This is news to me.
All right, Andy. Well, let's give it a classic Hoopla rating on a scale of 1 to Dune.
Oh my god.
Dune. 1 to Dune.
Oh, we need a number.
Is Dune like is that like 100? 1 to 100 is what you're trying to tell me?
There's roughly 800 pages in Dune. So we'll say on a scale of 1 to 800.
For some reason, I thought it was a little bit more. All right, 1 to 800. I think I'm going to get this a 725.
Wow.
That's pretty good.
Out of 800.
That's pretty good.
I would give it an upper B if you're going to translate that over. I liked it a lot.
Wow.
I thought it was a really cool opening. Like a lot of different interesting characters, visually beautiful, a masterpiece, and a lot of setup for Dune Part 2. Once again, for Zendaya's character and like the Fremen, they set up a lot in this movie, and I hope that it lands. But based on some of the critic reviews, I think it probably does land. So I'm excited. Absolutely. 725 out of 800.
A classic Hoopla rating yet again.
Classic Hoopla rating.
Jakey, what are you looking forward to in Dune Part 2? Give us a rating.
I'm looking forward to this being more of a Two Towers, Return of the King type film. We've had our setup. Now I'm looking to focus more towards an action type film where we have everything sort of well established. I think the pitfall that could come from this movie is people not going back and rewatching Part 1 because that was tremendously helpful in recapping in terms of all of the names, the houses, the characters, I mean, all of it. But all that to say, I do think what we're going to see in terms of the action in this film will be a distraction enough from all of the different intricacies to kind of ignore all that. And so for that reason, I'm very excited. But other than that, I'm
excited to ignore the details of the movie.
yeah. Because
I can't wait for them to spend time world building.
Because
so
the biggest problem with Part 1 was there were so many different details that, like, to try and delineate everything from it, it was just so distracting that I couldn't pay attention to the next scene.
So you're looking forward
Frank
to
Hergert writing, baby.
Yeah. So
it's a take.
Yeah, it's a take. It's a take. And going forward,
you heard it here first, folks. Take 2 Ambiens and then pop on it.
The point is, I think it's going to be much easier to follow Part 2. And I'm excited to see Zendaya's character sort of light up the screen with Timothée Chalamet. I think there's a lot. This is going to be an exciting film for sure. If I had to give Dune Part 1 a review and a number, it'd be 680 out of 800 for me.
Still pretty good.
That's like a B- for anyone else out
there.
Thought
it was boring. No, we don't.
I'm gonna do bonus points for going back and rewatching with subtitles. I will bounce it up to a 700 because that movie desperately needed it.
Oh,
absolutely.
It
absolutely.
Not only was it important to rewatch the film, Jake, like you said, I think it is important for people to rewatch before going into part 2. But you're absolutely right. I watched it for the first time in theaters, and then I maybe watched it when it came out on streaming, but probably just in the background or just, to enjoy it. I watched it with you yesterday with subtitles, with clear intent and focus, and you're absolutely right. Picked up on a lot of new things.
So, with all those things you picked up on, how are you going to rate this movie? And what are you looking forward to? Having seen a vision of the future, Chris, written in words, the destiny that awaits.
I'm going to relish my time here because, again, I am the lore master for only a few more minutes.
Well, Jamie is too.
This is true.
No.
Got him.
No. Give me this one. Jake, we watched it together yesterday, which was just a lovely experience.
It certainly was.
Big TV down in your place, nice little sound system. You got a lot of that bass.
Oh, dude, the bass. Oh my God, that played such a significant role in this movie. Okay, sorry, Chris.
You're
I didn't interrupt.
I'll talk to it. I mean,
please talk to it.
I'll talk to it. Hopefully I say the things you want to hear. I think you're right. I think a lot of the mystical forces of the magic system in this movie were absolutely embellished with the use of sound design and definitely the bass. You've got a lot of, bassy things like sand moving. You've got the ornithopter flapping wings, which are vibrating. It so much is about rhythm and sound, both on the planet of Arrakis, but also in the movie in terms of sound direction. So I think they nailed that. And then watching it on a sound system like Jake has is just fabulous and really drives home the point that rhythm and motion are a big part of survival on this land. You take that and you expand it to the whole sound design, the score, fantastic, everything.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer. We got to show.
I mean,
that was awesome.
We didn't talk too much about the metadata of the film. We kind of talked. Unlike Jake wanted, we talked mostly exposition.
Damn it!
And there's so much of it, and Jake, I understand where you're coming from, where you kind of get lost in the sauce, where they're explaining the great houses and the system, but that's a little bit of the point. I don't think you're supposed to fully understand when you're reading it or even watching it. You're not supposed to understand this universe just yet. This is foreign to you, and like I talked about with the hero's journey halfway through the pod, you're kind of thrown into the hero's journey for Paul kind of halfway through. There's not much learning to be done. You are thrown into it. But in part 2, I think you're going to be excited, both you and Andy there, about the practicality that we're going to find. There's still going to be world building. You can't ignore it. That's just the way that the book is written and will continue to be written. And with hopefully, if Denis signs on for Messiah and Children of Dune and everything to follow from this universe that could happen, Jake, we are kindred spirits. We've talked back and forth on the pod. We watched it together yesterday. Before you said your rating, I was also going to rate it a 680 out of 800. That was spot on. So I think it was really well done adaptation. I never saw the 1970 or 80 adaptation.
We should go back. We should do a quick one.
That would be.
Quick
it could be fun to go back and watch
That'd
that.
Be fun.
It could be a good idea. Maybe for our Patreon members as a special.
That's true. But just email me or something. I don't know.
680, and I think Dune Part 2 coming out this week is going to be even better than that.
Absolutely. It's going to be
I won't say what
fantastic.
I'm most looking forward to because I don't want to slip up.
Timothy Chalamet's character.
Hopefully more shirtless Timothy Chalamet. That's all I got to say.
This dude just doesn't give a shit about wasting sweat, you disgusting otherworlder. I'm excited for some of the new characters we have showing up. We've seen in this movie, every single actor was spectacular. A perfectly cast film.
Yes.
All of them nailed their roles. And part of that also comes from the director being fantastic and getting the best out of all the actors that he's working with. We have some other big actors coming in for this next movie. We have Florence Pugh showing up. We have Christopher Walken showing up. We have Austin Butler showing up, as well as some others. So if we can get the same performance out of everybody we had in part 1 who's returning for part 2, and the same level of greatness from all these new characters that we're going to meet, it's going to be incredible. And I cannot wait to see the home of the Fremen.
Ooh,
My God.
Jamie, can I ask a final question to the group here? If Denis Villeneuve, as it seems, makes a top movie here with Dune Part 2, he's also directed Arrival, Dune
My
Part
favorite
1,
science fiction film.
Dune Part 2.
Wow.
Oh, there's one
Is he
more.
approaching top tier?
There was
is that what you're about
one
to ask?
That was my question. Is he a top 3 sci-fi director of all time? Let's look at that
He
real
might
quick.
be.
Now
Let
I
me
need to
pull
go
up his
Sicario is probably the
IMDb.
one you're thinking about. And Blade Runner, which you
Oh,
would really
I meant
enjoy.
to say, I was going to say Blade Runner 2049. But yeah,
Actually, I haven't seen that either.
Sicario. Sicario followed up by Arrival, followed up with Blade Runner, and then
he's on a tear right now. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, I haven't seen any of his earlier work, so I
Me
can't
neither.
speak to that.
Polytechnique. I know I need
From
to see.
Arrival on, he's cruising. So he's making his way up there to one of the best.
Depending on what happens with this movie, he could be a top 3 sci-fi director of all time.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Christopher Nolan of
hired on
non-Christopher
for
Nolan directors.
Yeah.
He could be hired on for a canceled Star Wars project in the next 5 years.
Wait, should we give him the next trilogy? All right, let's.
Oh my
from
God.
there.
Let's stop.
No,
we don't
seriously,
want
I
to ruin
would.
Anyway,
anything
710 out
for
of
him.
800. Thank you all for tuning in.
Nice.
Tune in again next week. 710 at 800.
Nice.
Oh, okay, nice. Hoopla.
Dune-pla.
Dune-pla. Tune in next week. We'll be talking about Dune Part 2. And after that, we got other fun stuff. So, of course, follow us on all the social medias to find out what we're talking about, when we're talking about, where we're talking about. Also, we got all sorts of fun stuff going on. I hear from a reliable source that there's a very special TikTok about to get released at the time of this recording. So by the time you're listening to this, we've got some special TikToks out there for you to witness.
We're in a sci-fi overflow right now. We've got Bad Batch on the other side of things that we definitely want to talk about from our Disney universe. We got to watch Avatar. All the praise right now. Live action. We'll get there. But I'm very excited we took the time out, as all of our listeners should do, to watch Dune Part 1.
But if you've listened to this podcast, you don't need to watch it because we covered everything you could ever need. So you're welcome, folks. If you don't have time to watch Dune Part 1, this podcast is slightly shorter. See you next week. Bye.
Oh,
Jamie.
we're not doing
Favorite quote?
Jamie.
Favorite quote?
Jamie.
Oh, unbelievable.
We've done this for 2 years.
Oh, no.
I'll introduce
forgot
myself.
He's high on spice. He
He's
forgot.
so high. It's the melange.
The melange.
I don't know what
He's
I'm doing.
dehydrated.
He forgot his still
Is
suit.
there some water? Is there a mace?
I'm all out.
Is there a mace?
I'm all out.
Cry really quick and
everyone
take that
spit on
back.
him.
Oh, yeah. Wait, are we still live? Because the coffee making scene is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, yeah, that was gross.
Oh, yeah.
As we end
liked
every
it.
episode of the Hoopla podcast, we
get
discuss
it.
the most disgusting saliva-based scenes from the movie. And after that, we end the episode with the moment of highest Dune-pla, the quote of the movie.
As Jamie's favorite character, Jamie said, "The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience, a process that cannot be understood by stopping it. We must move with the flow of the process. We must join it. We must flow with it." Happy Dune-pla.
Beautiful. Happy Dune-pla. I should have said driest Dune-pla, not highest Hoopla. Oh well. Bye.
Missed opportunity.